going to come on and I'm going to be dancing. Be like,
it's come on now. Okay, great. So we are live. Hello, everyone. Hello. It's really nice to see that the chat is so animated already. Over 90 people are watching us at the moment. We're still going to wait for a couple of minutes to let other people join, to let more teachers from all over the world join our webinar. Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, nice to see familiar names as well. And while we're waiting for more people to join, those of you who haven't answered the poll question, please let us know where are you from, meaning whether you're a Novakid teacher or you're about to become a member of Novakid team, or maybe you're teaching elsewhere, offline or online. Everybody's welcome here today. If you haven't started your teaching career yet, you're also welcome. Okay, I see the majority is our Novakid teachers, over 80%, but I'm really happy to see that people from outside Novakid are also joining our discussion today. All right, greetings everyone. Hello. Before we begin our webinar, let me quickly introduce myself and introduce ourselves. So you're currently attending a webinar for ESL teachers provided by Novakid School. Some of you already know well enough what Novakid is about. Some of you might not be familiar with our school. We have been operating since 2017. And as you might already know, we've grown exponentially over the past few years. We actually have over 60,000 students at the moment. We have over 2,000 teachers from across the world. We've also conducted over 4 million lessons actually since the launch date, which is really impressive, right? My name is Elena. I am part of Novakid team. I work in teacher development team in particular. And so we're really excited to welcome you in this webinar. We hope that the new year has started in the best way possible for you. We hope that all your resolutions and goals are set. So now it's high time we all begin to improve ourselves and become even better educators, reach our goals. We hope that this webinar is going to be really helpful, whether you're just a beginner or you have been teaching for several years now. It doesn't matter. I think we all can share our perspectives on the same teaching strategies and the same teaching techniques. And this is all very exciting. I would like to introduce our amazing host, Brittany. Brittany has been an ESL teacher and ESL teacher trainer for many years. She's been with Novakid family for 1.5 years now. And I'm really happy that she's always eager to share her life hacks and teacher tricks and creative ideas of how to implement those same effective teaching strategies that we might already know about. So please welcome Brittany. Brittany, it's really nice to see you here today.
Hi, Elena, and hi, everyone. I'm really happy to see so many people and so many familiar faces for this month's webinar. I am particularly excited about this month's webinar because I believe that there are a lot of helpful hacks and tricks today that I get to share with you and that I've acquired after teaching ESL both online and offline. And I really hope that there are 1 or 2 things that you can pull from today that you can implement tomorrow in your classes, today if you have classes later, because I truly believe that sharing information is the key to all of our success as teachers. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and our presentation for today. We are looking at how to teach kids effectively. Now, looking at our agenda for today, we will start with a warm-up activity like we always do to get us into the mindset of sharing and to tap into our mind and see what we already know. And then we will look at the teaching standard, what it is and what it is expected of teachers, both at Novakid and wherever you are currently teaching. We will take a look at some effective teaching techniques. Think TPR, CCQs, think eliciting and error correction, And then finally, we will open the floor to a Q&A section at the end. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box and we will answer them either as we go or at the end during our dedicated Q&A time. Now, let's start with a warm-up activity. We all know that the ESL world loves its acronyms. In fact, ESL itself is an acronym. But how well do you know your ESL acronyms? On the next slide, there are going to be a lot of acronyms. I think there are actually 11. Now, don't worry if you don't know every single one of them. Try and challenge yourself to pick out 2 or 3 that you do know and write them in the chat box. Don't worry if it's not perfect, because together, collectively, as a teacher team, we will try to complete the entire list together. So challenge yourself, but don't put too much pressure on yourself. Here are our acronyms for today. All right, pull out 1 or 2 into the chat. TPR, STT, IPA, and GW.
Mm-hmm. Someone is putting more acronyms in.
Ooh, okay.
Good job, guys. Now, there also might be a few tricky ones that might only be familiar to Novakid teachers. They're very specific. Let's see if you can get them right. That's right, CLIL, content language and integration learning.
We have a lot of great answers. About CLIL, have we had that one yet?
Yes, we have.
Oh, wow.
Quite a few answered correctly. Great job, guys.
PKG?
I haven't seen the right one yet. IAP, I am panicking.
Oh, that's great.
Do not panic. It's all good. It's really easy to forget what these acronyms actually stand for because we operate them so much daily that we rarely use them as full, in full.
Absolutely. Well,
all right.
Let's take a look at some of these together. So let's check our knowledge as a collective. Our first one is TPR, which I saw a lot of correct answers, does stand for total physical response, and we'll go over exactly what this is a little bit more later. Our next 2 are very similar. They go hand in hand. We have teacher talk time and student talk time. And we've talked in past webinars about the appropriate ratio of STT to TTT, depending on the level of your student and the age. Our next 2 also go hand in hand. ICQs and CCQs, your instruction checking questions and your concept checking questions. Again, we'll look at these a little bit more later. We have CLIL, content and language integrated learning. And this is where your students are learning math or science or geography at the same time in English. Sorry, they're not learning math, science, and geography at the same time. They're learning math and English at the same time. That's pretty important to be clear because that's a lot if they were doing 4 different subjects. And it's really interesting too, and really cool, is at Novakid, we have special CLIL lessons for our level 3 and level 4 students. So they do get the opportunity to learn math in English or learn about different countries in English. And as a teacher, I've learned a lot about different countries too, things that I never thought I would learn either. But thanks to Novakid, now I do. Our next one is PPP, and this is a tried and tested method of teaching English to language learners, and that stands for presentation, practice, and production. And we use this a lot when we introduce new concepts. After that, we have IPA, which stands for your International Phonetic Alphabet. And these are those maybe somewhat strange symbols you sometimes see in your teacher's notes that help you provide the proper pronunciation for your students. Because maybe these letters and sounds are pronounced differently than what you're used to if you're an American teacher and you're teaching now British pronunciation, or from what the letter sounds like for your student in their native language versus how it is going to sound now. So when in doubt, always check the IPA for a particular word. The next one is the CEFR, which is the Common European Framework of Reference, which is a standardized level system for language. And this means that your student, if they are placed in a level at Novakid, they could go to another academy offline and they could find out what their level is, and they should be reaching the same benchmarks, whether or not they're online or offline. Because when we place our students in different levels, we're placing them in levels according to this framework. And this is really unique. This is not something that I've seen other online ESL companies do. So it's really, really cool that Novakid follows this framework because it really helps your students reach those benchmarks. Our last two are a little bit more difficult and very Novakid specific. We have NGW. I did see some of you had the correct answer as Novakid Game World. This is our new curriculum that we currently have for level 1 and level 2. I believe level 2, correct me if I'm wrong, Elena, just came out this past week.
True. Yes.
So it's really cool. I haven't taught level 2 yet, but I do have a lot of level 1 Magic Academy students, and they love all the new characters and the stories and the games. And our last acronym is PKG. And I'm not sure if I saw this answer in the chat box.
I saw someone said, what on earth is PKG?
And that's okay, because I didn't know what it was either until it got put into this. And I was like, oh yeah, like I know it's called that, but I've never seen it as an acronym before. So don't worry. And this stands for our prior knowledge guide. And this is where you can check what your students should know to be in a specific level, as well as where they are going and where they've come from. Now, our next thing that we're going to look at is the teaching standard. And a teaching standard tells you, as a teacher in a company, you know, what you should be doing to be professional, how you should dress, the quality of your lessons, and this will be provided by any company you work for. It doesn't matter if you're online or offline. Every company, even if they are not an ESL company, is going to have a professional standard. Now, Elena has provided a survey for us to see how much you believe this should be regulated within Novakid itself or any company. So I'm going to pass the floor to Elena for our survey.
Thank you very much, Brittany. Thank you. All right. Hi, guys. Hello again. As you can see, those of you who attended the webinars previously know that when there's a QR code on the screen, all you have to do is to scan it with your phone. It'll take you to Menti platform where we will answer some questions. Actually, today, they're not going to be questions. They're going to be statements, and we would like to know whether you agree with them or disagree. Remember, there are no wrong or right answers here. We're just opening up a discussion. So let's take a look at the first question. Well, I see some of you already submitted your answers. It is important to have certain rules and guidelines in place. Let's see. Okay. The percentage of people that answered closer to strongly agree is higher. All right. And I agree with you guys as well. I believe that no matter how creative workspace is, whether it is an offline training institution or an online school, there definitely should be certain procedures and guidelines that just make everybody's work easier. And I believe that here at Novakid, we do try to make our teachers' lives easier by implementing certain procedures that just help them navigate their teaching journey better. The next statement is teachers must cover their tattoos. I'm really curious to know what you guys think about this one.
This one's really interesting, I think. Oh, okay.
It can be arguable. Okay. All right. 7.17. We'll
This is
wait for.
very split. Okay. And feel free to write in the chat box if you want to discuss
For sure.
why you've decided to give it this rating.
All right. See, more people strongly agree. Well, more people agree that teachers must cover their tattoos. That is understandable. As we also think that working in such a field as online teaching, for example, our teachers at Novakid teach kids from all across the globe. We operate in more than 40 countries, and cultural differences certainly should be an aspect that you pay attention to. And in some countries, certain things might not be looked at the same way as it is in your country. So we should always be mindful of that, especially working with children. Parents might be really overprotective. So this is a very, very, very subtle issue to pay attention to. All right, now let's take a look at the next statement. Teachers should use TPR across all levels. So please let us know if you agree that you should be using TPR with kids aged 4 years old, with preteens,
13 and 14-year-olds.
You can see the number gradually moving towards strongly disagree as we comment on it.
Almost like Table Mountain. Like that's my it's like just like
right, Cape Town. Okay. Yes, of course, you also have to be mindful of the student age because TPR is not always necessary with older students. There are other techniques and other ways of making your instructions clear, introducing new vocabulary. All right, let's move on to the next statement. Companies should mandate a certain dress code for their teachers. What do you guys think? How accurate is this statement? It's really cool to watch that thing move. 47, 49 people. Let's wait for more people to vote.
You can see the peak too right at 5. Like you can see where people are just like 50-50.
Yeah. And this one also is a tricky question because, as you know, many institutions, especially if it's an offline training center, would have a particular dress code policy towards the teachers. Working online, it might seem like it's a bit of a more relaxed environment. However, it is also important to always look presentable, neat, smart, some certain things that definitely make a difference, especially working with children and, you know, gaining more students. Actually, I feel like being presentable during a trial lesson is one of the key components of a very successful trial lesson because, yeah, okay, let's take a look at this one. Teachers should be required to use specific error correction techniques. Should they or should they not? Who cares? Let's see. More people are moving towards agreeing. That is true. There are numerous error correction techniques that you can use to improve your students' accuracy. So well done. It matters what kind of prop you're using. And here we're also talking about the quality of props. Okay. Majority is agreeing. Okay. Good. We'll talk about different kinds of props later today. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for participating in this survey. It's really great to see that a lot of us are on the same page in terms of different questions. So now I'm going to pass the floor back to Brittany to continue talking about effective teaching techniques.
All right. Thank you, Elena. It's really interesting to see some of the topics that are like are really divisible and really divided amongst our teaching community, and thinking personally where I would fall across that, and seeing if I'm like in the majority, or if maybe my thinking is a little more on the outskirts of that. So it's really interesting to see everybody's opinion on that. Now, a big part of the teaching standard for any company, online or offline, is the lesson quality and the ESL methodology that is used. And these are considered the building blocks of ESL. And they include a ton of topics. They include things like student talk time, adapting the material, clear instructions, teacher talk time. And now there are a ton of building blocks for any lesson, for any company. And even though you might be trying to meet your lesson objectives, at the same time, you're probably using CCQs. You're probably trying to make sure your instructions are clear, and you're also probably using error correction. So it's impossible to separate all of these, because you're probably doing them all at the same time, no matter what you're teaching or what slide or what type of slide you're teaching. It's also impossible for us to cover all of these topics today in our webinar. So we're going to be talking about a couple of them and honing in on them and talking about specific examples for improving those areas of your teaching. But remember, just because we're talking about a certain area doesn't mean that another area might not just like creep in a little bit. So keep that in mind for the rest of the webinar. But now let's start with our first topic, which, before we get into it, I have a question. When giving instructions or introducing new vocabulary, what nonverbal cues do you use to let your students know what you expect from them? Write your answer in the chat box. The answer might have something to do with the building blocks we just looked at and the acronyms we looked at the beginning. So take those into account when you're thinking of your answers. When giving instructions or introducing new vocabulary, what nonverbal cues do you use?
Put my hand near my ear, waiting for them to answer. TPR, TPR, TPR. Gestures. Cup your ear. TPR for listen.
All right. So
good job, guys.
Very good. I think we've all understood that this is talking about TPR. Now, what is TPR? TPR, as we already talked about, stands for total physical response. These are any actions that you do during your lesson to help your student understand the material. Although you might find yourself using it across all levels, I think we can all agree that it's mostly useful in our beginning students. These are the students who might not have the level of comprehension necessary to understand everything that's being asked of them. But again, if you use a little bit of TPR in your higher levels, it's not going to hurt anything. And I also know, I saw one of the comments, it's really hard to just turn it all off. If you've taught 5 level 0 classes and then all of a sudden you have level 3 or level 4, it's hard sometimes to think, oh yeah, like I can put my hands down. So a little bit is okay, but you definitely want to be using it in level 0. So when do we use it? There are 3 main types of TPR. We use TPR for instructions, TPR for vocabulary, and sometimes we use full sentence TPR. And each one has their place. You'll probably use all of them in level 0, but you might not use all of them in your level 1 or level 2 or your more advanced lessons. So we have prepared a short little game that we're going to play. And on the next couple slides, you are going to see some videos of me doing TPR that I use in my classroom. Now, before I show you all of these, because they're a little bit of embarrassing to me.
They're amazing. What are you talking about?
Keep in mind that this is TPR that I've chosen. Okay, the TPR that you choose is your own. As long as you're consistent, it doesn't really matter what you choose for your TPR. Of course, you don't want to introduce something like apple like this, because your student probably won't associate this with apple later on. So you want to make it a little bit like what it is. But as long as it's consistent and introduced with the verbal cue at the same time, you can make TPR whatever you would like it to be. So without further ado, we're going to go through them together. Write in the chat box first if you think it is vocabulary, instruction, or full sentence, and what you think it is. So let's go.
Let's do this. There we go. I think we have plenty of correct answers. Well done. That was an easy one, to be fair. That is an instructional TPR to ask the student to circle.
And I know there might be some questions why this isn't vocabulary to circle now, or vocabulary for circle. Now, when I do my shapes, I use both my hands together. I use circle, square, triangle. But when I do instructions, I try to make it like the movement so that they show that it's something that they're supposed to be doing. Let's look at the next one.
This is my favorite one because it's the most confusing one.
This is the most confusing one?
Yes. Let's see. Oh, there we go. I guess it's just me. Everybody guessed it.
Okay, good.
Well done.
All right, so this is vocabulary. This is,
Yes, Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell and I are on the same team. I also thought this was dance.
Okay. And then, of course, I had to show Elena how I dance, and I dance like this, which is also ridiculous.
Marvelous.
Right? That's fine. There's going to be a whole generation of level zeros that come up who are dancing like this. So if you get one, you know it's from me.
Can't wait to meet them.
You're welcome, and I'm sorry at the same time. Let's look at the next one.
Making a difference every day. All right, let's look at this one, guys. Someone says, I run while breathing. I run while breathing hard. I look so funny. That could be a good TPR. All right, so this one is instructions, point. Well done.
You can use point or you can use touch. It's up to you. All right, our next one. I think this is the most difficult one, or the one that's the most ambiguous.
Kinda, yeah. Let's see if you can guess. Jewel says in the box. In the cup.
Oh!
Close, close enough. Drag in the box. Put in a box. On the cup. Is that ice cream? What is it, Brittany?
Okay, so this is what I used for cup. This was cup, okay? But then if you've taught the lesson where we talk about cup, you'll know that later on in the lesson, the next word that they learn is cupcake. So I take my cup and I make it a cupcake, which now I realize maybe doesn't look like that.
But as I mentioned before, whatever works for your students.
Exactly. Cup, cupcake. But yeah, so it's cup. It was vocabulary. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, any guesses here? I am strong. That is definitely a complete sentence.
Yeah.
I see two. We have a great beginning. Try to finish that sentence. I can see two.
Oh, very good.
Christine, good guess. I work out, see my muscle.
I don't work out.
I have got two big eyes. My muscle exploded 2 times. You guys are phenomenal.
Okay, so this is a full sentence. And this is what I use for I can see, because if you're strong, you can do a lot of things. So I can see two big triangles. So up until this point, they've learned can, they've learned the sight word I, they've learned see. So this is how I help them put those words in the correct order. And even some of my little 4-year-olds, they're like, and they'll do it themselves. So when they are telling me the sentences or the different shapes that are on the screen, they will do the full sentence for me using the TPR. And I think it's great. So well done, everyone. I understand some of those were a little tricky. And again, TPR can be anything you want it to be. And what is obvious for me is not going to be obvious for another teacher, and that's okay. Try to make it somewhat intuitive so that if you do have a substitute, that their TPR won't be wildly different than yours. But I think it's really important, especially in your younger students, to decide what you're going to use for TPR and follow it through. Because I still have some students now who are in level 2 who remember my TPR when they were in level 0, and they're like, oh yeah. So they're able to like error correct themselves based on seeing something that I taught them a year ago. So
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great.
Let's go now to our next topic. What verbal cues can you use to make sure the student understands your instructions? So write your answer in the chat box. Think about our past slides, not about TPR. Think about our past slides and what it could be.
CCQ, okay, ready, yes, no.
These are for
Thumbs up.
instructions. Do we have a correct answer?
We have lots of CCQs and ICQs.
Okay, fantastic. That's correct. Here we're talking about ICQs. What are they? ICQs are instruction checking questions. They are the questions you ask your student to see if they understood your instructions. They're not the same as CCQs. Here we're just looking at instructions. Now, you might be thinking, do we actually use ICQs in the classroom? I don't think I use them. Do I use them? Should I be using them? And you would be right to assume that, because in the online classroom, most of the time you're teaching one-on-one. So it's going to be really obvious if your student isn't doing what you expected them to do right away. ICQs are more important when you're teaching to a large group or when you're teaching offline, because in that case, you want to set a task for your students and be able to circulate. And you want to make sure that when you come back to that first group, they're still doing what you expected them to do. But again, it's true, we don't really use them in our online classes, because once you set a task, your student should be able to do it right away. They should know what the task is. They might not be able to do the task if they don't have the knowledge or they need some more scaffolding, but they should know what the task is. So why do we have it in the presentation then? Because there's one really big thing to remember about ICQs, and that is that you should never ask your student, do you understand? This is not an appropriate ICQ in the online classroom, in the offline classroom, anywhere. This is not an appropriate ICQ. Why? Well, if I'm just learning a language, one of the first things I'm going to learn is the words, do you understand? Or some sort of rendition of that. And I'm going to learn to nod my head to that question every time, or to say yes. Because when you're learning a language, when you're learning anything, you don't want to feel like you're letting anyone down, including yourself. You want to show that you do understand, that you're able to get it right away. So if I am presented with a question like, do you understand? along with many of your students, this is something that you're not going to get an accurate response to. So though we don't really use them in our classroom, the one that we definitely don't use is, do you understand? So let's move on from that and look at another question. You've introduced a new grammar or vocabulary topic. What do you do to check if the students have understood?
Now we've already seen some of the correct answers previously. That's right. Concept checking questions.
Very good. So while you don't necessarily use ICQs in your classes, you definitely want to be using CCQs. And CCQs, again, stand for concept checking questions. This is where you're asking questions to see if your student understood what you've taught them. This is a chance for them to demonstrate what they've learned, and also a good check to see if they've really understood. Are they able to produce something? Are they able to correctly practice it? And this looks a little different depending on the different levels that you're teaching. In your very young learners, these are probably only going to be vocabulary concept checking questions, because in our most beginning levels, they're really only learning vocabulary and small sentences with minimal grammar. Now, when you get into your young learners, you're going to be doing a mix of grammar and vocabulary concept checking questions. And then when you get into your more advanced learners, most of your CCQs will be grammar based. And that's okay, because at this age, most of the vocabulary will either be something that's been repeated from previous levels or is easy to for them to remember and learn, especially when it's presented with the words. So one thing before we get into a couple demos, there's something very important with CCQs. It's really, really important that no matter what CCQ you're using, that you only use the vocabulary within and grammar within your students' competency. What does that mean? It means that if you're teaching level 1 or level 2, you shouldn't be asking them questions in the past tense because they haven't learned it yet. They only learn was, were at the very end of level 2. If you want to ask them a question about something that happened in the past, your best bet is to scaffold back. Ask them what day today is, ask them what day yesterday was, and then ask a question using whatever day that was. And in that sense, you'll be able to provide enough information to your student so that they'll be able to answer accurately, even without having the grammar necessary. But it's really important to try to make sure that your questions that you're asking fit in to the student's level. So now, Elena and I are going to show you a couple different demos for CCQs and how you can do them across different levels. And here is my note that, here it is, only use language within your student's competency. Okay.
I'm ready to be your student, Brittany.
Excellent. Okay, so here is our first example. And this is going to come from a very beginning, very young learner. And I'm going to say, Elena, touch pencil. Very good. Touch chair. Great job. Table.
No.
What's this?
Book.
Very good. Now, here you can see there are two different options for CCQs at level 0 or with your very young learners. The first option is to verbally say the instruction and have your student touch it or point to it, because sometimes it's easier to hear it to jog their memory first. As they get more comfortable with the vocabulary, you want them to start producing it themselves. At that point, you can either give them a wrong answer like table, or you could say, what's this? Now, at this level, your student might not understand what's this, but if you use your pen tool or your TPR and you say, hopefully they'll understand it, and that way they'll be able to show you what they've learned. Let's look at our next example here. This is more of a higher level. So this is from level 3, which would be a more advanced learner. And it starts with this slide here on the left, at which point I'm going to ask my student, Elena, please read.
Luna wears a t-shirt every day.
Great job. Elena, what does Luna wear on Monday?
Luna wears a t-shirt on Monday.
Great. What does Luna wear on Tuesday?
Luna wears a t-shirt on Tuesday.
What does Luna wear on Wednesday?
Luna wears a t-shirt on Wednesday.
What does Luna wear on Thursday?
A t-shirt?
Friday?
A t-shirt.
On Saturday?
A t-shirt.
And on Sunday?
A t-shirt.
Great. What does Luna wear every day?
Luna wears a t-shirt every day.
Great job. Every day we use
wears.
Fantastic. Now, is my student going to be annoyed that I made them repeat the same sentence 7 times? Maybe. It's happened, but that's okay, because we're creating moments where your student later is going to remember, oh yeah, my teacher made me repeat that sentence 7 times because it's showing a routine. So it's okay. You want to create these moments where your student is going to remember them. They're going to remember to use the present simple with every day. Then on the next slide, Elena, today is Monday. What is Luna wearing?
Luna is wearing a sweater today.
Great job. Now, I'm going to draw a question mark in my next slide, my next box, and I'm going to say, what is Luna wearing on Tuesday? And your student hopefully will say, I don't know.
I don't know.
Or make a confused face. And then I'm going to say, on Wednesday?
I don't know.
And on Thursday?
I don't know.
Right. But today, what is Luna wearing?
Luna is wearing a sweater today.
Very good. So then I'm going to show my board again where I've written today and now, because we want them to associate those together. And I'll say, today
is wearing.
Very good. Now, this board is something that I will use later on when they are in the practice stage, less so in the production stage, because hopefully at this point they will have understood that. But here it's really important for them to start being able to differentiate between using the present simple for routines, things that happen every day, and using the present continuous for things that are happening now. And by repeating the question multiple times and having them say, I don't know, or having them repeat the sentence multiple times really helps them with their memory. Later on, they'll be like, oh yeah, my teacher made me, say that sentence 7 times because it's a routine. And this is something that will help your students later on when they're in the practice and production stage. All right, and then the next slide, they're together. So this is where you could repeat that again, have your student read the slide, and then move on to the practice stage. All right, so our last demo for a concept checking question is this one, which comes from our level 1 Novakid game world. And here I usually circle the first one and I say, what's this?
An apple.
Yes. Oh, how many?
One apple.
Very good. An or s?
An apple.
Good. Make a sentence.
This is an apple.
Very good. Then I'll move to the next one.
Apples.
Good. How many?
2
Very
apples.
An or s? Very
Apples.
good. What are these?
These are apples.
Great job. Now here on this slide, the main thing that you want your student to understand is that we use a or an with singular countable nouns, and that we use the S sound for plural countable nouns. So by asking them how many, having them reinforce 1 or more, and then having them create that sentence, it will help to prove that they are showing you what they know. All right, so that's it for concept checking questions. Let's look at our next topic, which is another question for all of you. How often do you spoon feed your students all the information? Or what do you do to see what they already know? How often do you spoon feed your students all of the information?
Before we get some answers, I just wanted to point out one of the comments saying, Brittany, you're pretty awesome at what you do.
Oh, thank you so much.
I concur. That is true. Let's see. Not too often.
Good. What do you do to see what they already know?
Let them finish your sentence. I'm not afraid of silences, so sometimes I shrug my shoulders and put a question on my face. That's a good one, Stephen.
Very good.
I'm less likely to spoon feed my regular students because I know their strengths. That's a good one too. Lollipop. If all students were like Elena. Oh.
She's a pretty special student. Okay.
That sounds very, very ambiguous.
I didn't mean it like that. She's very special.
That's okay.
Great.
Probably too often if they're struggling. I need to be patient. That's right, Wendy.
So the key, I guess, word here that we're looking for is eliciting. We want to elicit as much as possible from our students. Why? When we elicit, it reduces your teacher talk time and it increases your students' output. It also is a great way to extract information from the student to see what they already know. And in this, you're also testing their prior knowledge. And this is fantastic. Now, like some of you have mentioned, sometimes it's really hard to wait. But it is important to always wait a little bit before you start eliciting, unless you know for sure it's something that your student hasn't been taught and that you are trying to take the lesson further by extracting additional information. And eliciting also creates this student-centered learning. So it helps the student so that they can prove what they already know. And it, again, creates this situation for success where your student is more likely to remember what they're learning. So when we elicit, there are a couple ways we can do that. Here's my note again to leave appropriate wait time. So when we elicit,
always on time.
There are a couple different strategies that we can use. Not all of these strategies are going to work for every single student. They're not going to work for every single level. And it's important to find the strategies that work for your specific student, as well as for you. What strategies do you find work best with your students? Some of these strategies are verbal and some of them are nonverbal, and you want to try and use a mixture of both. We have cliffhangers, which are sentence starters, where you start the sentence like I did previously with the CCQs. This is, so you can help the student a little bit there. Flashcard props with clues, beginning sounds, 2 choices, modeling, and narrowing the selection by 2 possibilities, and drawing a picture. And these are all different strategies that you can use in your class. Now, Elena and I have prepared a couple more role plays for you using these eliciting strategies. And in the chat box, as you're watching our role plays, try to decide what kind of eliciting we are using, or I am using, to get my student to show me what they know and to increase their talk time. Okay, so don't be afraid to put in your comments in the chat box. Okay. Oh, one more. Underline, circle, and point out keywords. All right, here is our first one. Elena, have you got a brother?
Yes, I have.
What's his name?
Alex.
Oh, full sentence. His
name is Alex.
Great job. How old is he?
He is 14.
Great job. Elena, ask me.
Brittany, have brother?
Close.
Have you got a brother?
Well done. Yes, I have. What?
Oh, what's his name?
Great job. His name is Nathaniel. Well done. So, what kind of eliciting did you see in our short role play? This is my real brother, but about 10 years ago. Oh, okay. What do we have?
We have cliffhanger and props, flashcard, cliffhanger, finger pointing, beginning words.
Very good. Now, these are things that Elena had already been taught. She had been taught, have you got, and what's his name? But here I want to also see if she's able to use how old is he, and to be able to differentiate between using possessive adjectives and using subject pronouns. So between saying his name is and he is 14. So here is also a chance on this slide. I love eliciting as much information as possible for my students. I could probably write you a dossier on half of my students who I could tell you how old their mom is, what their dad does for a living. If you have a student who can talk, this is the perfect slide for that. I found out today that my student has no cousins because she was able to be like, my aunt and uncle, no children. So there's so much you can learn from your students from slides like this. So don't be afraid to push it a little bit more to elicit as much as you can. And then write it down so that later when you bring up that aunt or uncle, your student is shocked because they didn't realize that you were listening. So these are all really great things that you can do for later on as well. Let's look at our next one. This one obviously is going to be for a younger student. Elena, what color is this? Green or red?
Red.
Great job. What color is this?
Blue.
Great job. So here again, you've seen two different types of eliciting techniques. In my real class, I'm going to let for a little bit more wait time before jumping in and giving my student options or giving my student the first letter. But for the sake of today's webinar, just a little bit more sped up. And then our next one, which is probably one of my favorite techniques that I like to use. So I'm going to take off the screen share just so you can see everything that's happening at once. Now, this is something I do when I introduce any question, especially in level 2, as long as the question doesn't have an auxiliary verb. So this is something you can do with any of your questions. I used it today with a different question form. So my student and I have just finished learning how to use can and can't in sentences. And the slide directly before this, they've had to fill out the sentence saying, I can run, I can't fly, I can swim. So I'm going to take one of those sentences that I know the student will answer, I can, and I write it on a board. And I ask my student, Elena, please read.
I can run.
Great job. This is a statement. I can run.
I can run.
Great job. Elena. Question. Oh.
Run?
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 Run? I can run? No. This is where I would write 2 lines.
Can run?
Close.
Can I run?
Great job. Now I'm going to fill in the sentence and fill in the question for my student using what they have discovered on their own. Then,
I can run. Can I run?
great job.
I can run. Can I run?
Now I'm going to make my student do this a couple more times, but I'm not going to make Elena do that because it's a little bit much. And at this point, now that I know that the student has understood what I want them to do, I want to see if they can apply it. So then I'm going to white out my subject and write,
He can run. Can he run?
very good. So here you can see my excellent student is able to apply this right away. And I might, if my student is struggling, I might put in a different subject just so that my student is able to start seeing the inverting of the subject and the pronoun. Now you can use this. Today I used it with, I have got a doll. Have I got a doll? You can use it with a lot of different question forms. Again, the thing you want to make sure is that there's not an auxiliary, because if you have an auxiliary, it's not going to work. But it should work if it is a simple switching of the first two. Now, once I do this with my first instant, the next time I bring out this board and do the same thing, the student is more likely to catch on quicker. Sometimes I don't even have to write the little arrows. Sometimes I can just, and then later on as well, I won't use my board and I'll just go like this if they ever forget to switch the words around. So then I change it to this slide, which nicely comes after. And then I make my student make all of the questions. So we start with can I, and then I hold up a flashcard because I want my student to be practicing the vocabulary at the same time as the grammar. So can I jump? And then I'll circle the next one for my student. And I'll ask my student, can
he swim? Sorry, I was looking at the comments.
So, and your student will get the hang of looking and making the questions and waiting for your flashcard. If my student is right on the money, I'm going to do it super fast so that they have to like be paying attention. But sometimes they like that challenge where they're like, can she jump? And then they really enjoy this idea. And this works really well. This idea of making them make the question works really, really well because again, they're doing it on their own. So they're going to come away thinking, oh yeah, like I knew that. And it's been scaffolded for them. And then they feel fantastic with themselves. Okay, so let's continue on to our next topic, which is what do you do to improve your students' accuracy and pronunciation? So again, write in the chat box.
Let's see, today we have already mentioned it briefly. Repetition. Do the chant with clapping hands.
Good.
Drills, drills, drills.
Mm-hmm.
Drills are important. I have them repeat the words. Repetition.
So it sounds like we are all right on the same page. All of these things fall under the topic of error correction.
And Kyle just typed timely error correction, but not
fantastic.
Good one, Kyle.
So error correction. Error correction is super important, but I think we can all agree that if you are learning a language, there's nothing more demotivating or nothing harder on your ego if you just like can't get it right away. And if your teacher is demotivating or saying wrong, then it's really, really hard for you to want to participate and to do well in class. And you want your teacher to believe in you and to help you along the way. And sometimes it's just best to have types of error correction that are more, they're just like nicer and they aren't as harsh and in your face. And it's when the student is able to correct themselves is ideal. So when we think about types of error correction, the first thing you want to think about is the correction necessary? Okay. Do you need to correct your student? And the answer to that is going to be whether or not you are correcting them based on fluency or based on accuracy, or if you just don't need to correct them at all. So you want to correct your students immediately if you are focusing on accuracy. These are your grammar drills. These are your vocabulary drills. These are things that they should be able to get right away. And it's okay if they don't get it right away, but we want to be correcting it at least once or twice before moving on. Because when they're introduced to new vocabulary, you don't want them learning it wrong from the beginning. So these are the things you want to correct immediately. We also have delayed error correction. And delayed error correction is when you're focusing on fluency. These are your free talk slides or more of your production slides or your closing slides when you are getting to know your student a little bit better, or when the error isn't on what exactly you're focusing on right away. Finally, we have skipped error correction. And this is where you don't correct your student at all. And you might not correct your student if you're focusing on other areas other than the mistake, or if you're just letting your student talk to you to build that confidence. So when you are error correcting, there are some different strategies. Similar to your eliciting strategies, you have reformulation, where you give it back to them, but correctly, cliffhangers, the beginning of the sentence, prompting with options, gesturing, finger correction, and props. Now, Elena and I are going to do a couple more role plays for you. And while you're watching these role plays, try to decide what type of error correction is it, immediate, delayed, or skipped, as well as what strategy is being used. Okay, so let's look. Elena, when do you usually start to prepare for New Year's Eve?
I prepare 15 December.
Okay, and who do you usually celebrate New Year's Eve with?
I, with my parents, celebrate New Year's Eve.
At your house or at your family's house?
At grandma's house.
Oh, great. Does your grandma live close to you or far away?
Grandma live very, very close.
Okay, and what do you usually eat on New Year's Eve?
We eat many meat and vegetables.
And what is your favorite vegetable?
My favorite vegetable, broccoli.
Okay, so here I think that hopefully it's a little bit obvious that I just let Elena talk, because at this point we are talking about New Year's Eve and talking about different things that people do on New Year's Eve. But now I just want to know more about Elena. I want to know, what does she do on New Year's Eve? How does she prepare? Did Elena make mistakes? Yes, she did. But I've probably corrected her throughout the whole class. And now I'm just giving her an opportunity to just tell me what she wants to tell me. And I think that's really important with some of your students. Sometimes they just have so many ideas in their head and they just want to tell you everything all at once. And your job is just to listen to them and to give them the feedback that they hope to get and have follow-on questions. So in some instances, it's perfectly fine to skip error correction. Okay, so our next one. Elena, how often do you use the microwave?
I use the microwave always.
Very close. Elena, I use the microwave.
I always use the microwave.
Well done. Now, here, you can write in the chat box whether or not it was delayed or skipped or immediate. But this was immediate correction. So I want my student to, right from the beginning, know that they need to be putting the adverb of frequency before the object. I also might draw a little map here so that she can see how the sentence should be put together. Okay, let's look at our next one. Elena, where do you live?
I live in Russia, in Yekaterinburg. There are many beautiful buildings, and there are lots of museums. My favorite place is to go to the park with my dog. I go to the park every day.
Wow, I love going to the park with my dog too. Elena, do you live in the Russia or Russia?
I live in Russia.
Very good. Where in Russia do you live?
In Yekaterinburg.
Very good. So here you can see that I let Elena talk, but I did want to correct her adding the article the before countries, because while it is true that we do use the before the USA or the UK, most countries don't add the article. So I use my little prop, and I usually just put my finger in front of it so that she can see like no the. But it's also really important that because she's telling me about where she lives, I want to show her that I'm listening, talking about my dog, engaging in that conversation, but also sneaking in that little correction right at the end. Okay, I think we have one more. Elena, make sentences.
I play football.
Good.
I watch my hands.
Elena, I watch my hands.
Oh, no, I watch TV.
Great job. I
do homework.
Good.
I eat grandma.
Oh, you eat grandma?
No, I eat ice cream.
Well done. So here are some common errors that I've noticed with my students where they will confuse watch and wash. But once they see the TPR for those words, they're like, oh, of course, that's not what I meant to say. And this is the first time that they've seen the verbs without the pictures. So up until this point, everything's been presented together. So it's easy for them to read the word, see the picture, and then have that connection. But now we want them to show us that they can make the sentences when they're separate. And this is where you might see a lot of errors, at which point this is a great slide for you to do the TPR for, because they'll know, like, I watch my hands, and they'll be able to be like, oh, what's similar to watch? Wash. So it's a great way for them to self-correct by looking at the TPR. All right, so we have one more topic that we're going to talk about today, and that is, what is something you can't imagine a young learners class without? This is my favorite topic.
Yes, we know that. Mine too. Please do not eat our grandma. Okay, I won't.
Like Little Red Riding Hood, right? Where the wolf eats grandma.
Ate grandma, yeah. Yay, we have props. You guys are correct.
Fantastic. So it's great that so many of you realize that you shouldn't be neglecting
Smiling is a good one.
Smiling?
Yeah, someone mentioned smiling is something they can't imagine in a young learners class without, and I agree.
It's also a good prop, I think.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really glad that so many of you do use props, and props are a great way to add things to your lesson. Props can be anything. Props can be homemade, props can be printed, props can be found around the house and added in as realia. Props, anything could be a prop. Now, you can also print your props. So you saw me use my props earlier, my flashcards. Novakid teachers are super lucky, because if you go to the portal, you can find props, you can find flashcards for every single level and unit. And you don't have to do what I did, but I do like to print them off because they're super easy to just grab when I know, okay, I'm doing level 1, unit 8. These are my flashcards for today. And you can use these for extra games as well. flashcards usually fall into 3 categories, and that includes instructions, drilling and corrections, and praise. And you might have props that you can use for each one of these, or you might have props that you can use for all of them. And what you choose to use for props is up to you. Now, if you do choose to use flashcards, it is important to make sure that they are high quality flashcards. Your best bet is to print them from the portal, because you know that they are going to be the same pictures as in the lessons. But as far as your realia and props that you find around the house, I like to categorize them into 2 categories. I have my must-have props and I have my nice-to-have props. So we're going to start with my must-have props. These are my must-have props. These are the props that I find myself using every single class. Doesn't matter what level, it doesn't matter what lesson or unit. And the best thing about all of these props is that they fit into this little plastic container. So if I travel, I only take this with me. So these are my ideal props that I couldn't live without. So they include my whiteboard, which you've seen me use multiple times today, with a small eraser and some whiteboard pens. I have my circles that I use for grammar, for eliciting, for all sorts of corrections. I've been using them since the beginning. Sometimes my student only needs to see the color of it and they know what the correction is going to be. I have my star that I use for praise and rewards. I have a sound machine, which my students love, because it's got like
My favorite.
You can like clap your hands. And then if we're doing like the blast off where they're reading the words going up, there's like an explosion. And so the students really get into it. And if I don't push the button for them, they will make the sound for me. And then I use a boy, a girl, and a dog. And I think it's really important to have these 3 props because you can use them for so many things. You can use them for he, she, it. You can use them for boy, girl, dog. You can use them for his and hers. You can use them for hers and his. There are so many things you can use the props for. You can print off Andy and Jenny, but I really find that having props that aren't level specific to be really great because the students can see them and they're not like being confused over, is this Jenny or is this girl? So I feel like these are really great props. And then the marker is here because I like to take notes in marker. I'm a visual learner. So during my lesson, it's really easy for me to not even look at my paper and to write a note. Again, if I find out my student's aunt's name, I'm going to write it down on my paper. And by using, I just always have a marker if I travel. So these are my must-have props.
Brittany, a lot of teachers are asking where to get one of those nifty sound machines.
Amazon. I think it was like $10.
There you have it.
It's literally just called sound machine. And now I don't use all of the buttons because some of the buttons are a little bit, you can probably imagine what this one is. So it's probably not something that you're going to want to use in class. So, and then I have my nice to have props. So these are my props that I use if I'm at home. They're props that I can live without if I'm traveling, but they're props that really help to scaffold a lesson. I have a container with a small hippo that I use for teaching prepositions. I use it for prepositions in level 1, level 0, and even into level 3 when they're learning on top of versus above. So I use this little hippo in a container a lot. I have my cup, but again, TPR works. I have a name tag so that on the other side, it's blank. So if I'm teaching a new student, I say, my name is Brittany, and I flip it over and I say, what's your name? And it really helps them see like, oh, this is where my name goes. A flag, if I want to ask my student where they are from, because I'll say I live in, or I'm from America. Where do you live? Where are you from? I have my magnifying glass that I really like to use for when we're doing phonics, so that they're like circling the A, they're circling the other phonics. I have a dollar bill, which you'd be surprised how much I use this dollar bill. It was on my desk randomly one day and it just never left. But if you teach young students, thinking your 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, they're losing teeth. They're losing teeth every day. Every day someone's losing a tooth. And then they like to tell you, oh, the tooth fairy came. So I'm like, oh, like, did you get money? So it's really easy to be like, oh, and then sometimes they go and run and get their little wallets and they show you their money that they got. So it's a really great, like, just a prop to have. It's just something that I never thought I would use as much as I do. And then I have my microphone that I made, which is great for role plays, where I speak and you speak. I know some of you have mentioned that there are a lot of role plays, especially in the Novakid game world in level 1. And sometimes it's really hard to get your student to avoid parroting you or to repeating you after you. And I use my microphone. So I like point to myself and I speak. And then when I want them to say something, I point it at them and I have them speak. And the microphone, I don't know, it's a magical thing. It really helps them.
It does help.
If it was smaller, it would go in this container and I would take it with me everywhere, but it's not. I also have some animals that I use for a lot of things, but I also tend to use my background a lot. So like, can it jump? Which one is bigger? And then finally, my balloon. You're going to have children who have birthdays and they're not going to tell you until you're in class with them. It's going to happen. And when it happens, you're going to feel terrible because I always feel terrible. It doesn't matter if I've asked them before, perhaps they've given me the wrong date. So I have made a habit of having a cute little tiara that I got from the dollar store. And I have a birthday balloon. So when they come on, they tell me it's their birthday today, I'm going to sing happy birthday to them. And it's just like that, one of those things that brings in that much more of a familial thing for them. They bring in that more attachment for you. And these are great things that I use. Again, my must-haves and my nice-to-haves. Now, I'm really curious because I love props and I love expanding my props. So I would like to know, what are your most used props? So think of the props that you couldn't imagine living without. What props do you use every class? What props do you use to praise your student? Be really impressed if someone had a magic wand. With the Novakid game world, I really want to get one. But what props are you using?
I see Jessa said, my student just celebrated her birthday, and when she told me, I grabbed my ukulele and sing her a birthday song. That's so wonderful.
Oh, that's lovely. I can't play the ukulele.
Me neither.
Yeah. Oh.
We've always known our teachers are super talented. You guys are great. Flashcards, stars, toys, food. Real food.
Cupcake.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a cupcake, you don't need to make a cupcake.
That is true.
You have the cup.
Spare yourself. My whiteboard, name tag, markers.
I also use my cup a lot. When my students drink water during class, I'm like, oh yeah, me too. Like I can drink too. And then I always make a point of like tipping it upside down so the parent doesn't see that I'm like drinking in class. Oh,
that's very considerate. Okay, word cards with I, he, she, it, we. Yes, that is really helpful to have pronoun flashcards handy. A lot of content is based. Brittany, please get a cupcake.
I have one somewhere. I'm just not sure where it is anymore. Okay.
Mr. Great. Potato Head and Mr. Potato Head for body parts.
Oh, that's a fantastic idea.
Barbie. I have my party blower. Good. Puppets.
Right. So many great ideas. Okay. So that pretty much wraps up everything that we have prepared to share. So we're going to move now into our question and answer, and I'm going to stop sharing because I feel like it's easier to see both of us to answer the questions. And we'll go through some of the questions that maybe have been left unanswered during today's presentation.
Mm-hmm. So one of the questions was from Xanda, talking about tattoos. What is acceptable? Are we allowed to show a small one? I would have something to share.
Err on the side of caution. So I think that if you have a tattoo, Novakid has made it clear that they would like you to cover it up. So I know a lot of teachers have maybe a wrist tattoo and they will wear a, what are they called? Armbands? Cover that up. And I understand, you might live in a country that's really, really hot. But unfortunately, like, it's always better to err on the side of caution. I've even taken to wearing long sleeves in a lot of my classes, not just because it's winter, but because a lot of your Middle Eastern countries find it more acceptable for people to be fully covered from the neck to the wrist. So I always would say to err on the side of caution and just cover it up to keep and to be safe.
I agree. Working internationally is, comes with its peculiarities. And as you guys know, we have a lot of students from Middle Eastern countries, and you never know. The next question is, I have that problem with one of my students. His mom always spoon feeds him all the answers. It can get irritating at times. I do not know how to say it to his mom without offending her. I think we've covered similar questions in our previous webinars.
And a lot of teachers mentioned they would say, oh, great job, mom. Let Johnny answer now, or a star for you, mom. I don't have the guts to do that. So I usually let it slide for a couple lessons, especially if they're a new student. So if I only taught them for their trial and maybe one lesson or two lessons, I'll give it until usually the review of the first unit, at which point I'm going to write a message into my feedback telling the parent how important it is for their student or their child to be able to answer independently. And I usually use and provide some sort of like scientific reasoning behind it. So it's not just me, it's studies have shown that your confidence will grow. So then I also give what I'm going to do. So I explain, I'm going to let Johnny have 7 seconds. And then after those 7 seconds, if he needs help, I will provide that. Don't worry, because together later on, he will feel more confident. So there are a lot of different strategies that you can use, but sometimes you just need to find out what works for you and for that student.
That's true. I also think it really is important to know and to feel confident in what you're doing, whatever strategy you're going to use. And as Brittany mentioned, when you are putting something like that in the feedback, just try to reason why exactly this is going to benefit your student. I actually have seen this question from Christine after our role play when you asked me to ask you as a teacher. It is challenging for me how to do TPR for Ask Me.
Usually I go, your turn, or I say, you are the teacher, ask me.
I think it's also a matter of repetition. Like if it's your regular student, especially if you make it kind of a routine every time you introduce an interrogative form, then it's easier. It gets easier with every time.
I also start, you are the teacher from level 0. So even not usually unit 1 or unit 2, but by unit 3, I'm going to make sure that my student is asking me questions where they're circling it and they're saying like, and they want me to ask and they want me to say the color. And after a couple of correct answers, I'm going to give them a wrong answer because again, I still want a concept check. I still want to see that they are able to be like, no. And when they say no to me, I always do and they love it. They're just like, Matt, you're wrong. I'm like, okay, like harsh. But it's
funny because you never use that towards your students.
Well, so I don't use that unless it's a correct or incorrect. So there are some exercises in level 2 or 3 where they have to read a sentence and they have to tell me if the sentence is correct or incorrect. And at that point, I'll do it's incorrect or it is correct. But it's never directed towards the student, which is really, really important. Sometimes I'll direct it towards myself. Like you could see in my presentation where I said, I can run. No. So like sometimes I make myself look really dumb so that the student can be like, no, like
I know it.
Exactly. So it's really important that you never direct no or wrong or really towards your student. But I do
I think
use my
keeping the
little,
motivation level is key here.
absolutely.
Nathan wants to know, what do you do with an impatient student that has a hard time listening?
During an instruction, I guess it depends on if it's an instruction or if it is a role play. I have a student right now that I'm really trying to maximize my microphone for my turn to speak, your turn to speak, especially during the role plays, because the student just wants to read the role play right away. So I will say, like, oh no, the tables are flying. I'm not really sure what I taught today. It's been so long now. So, and then I like keep it on myself. And then when I want them to repeat or I want them to say it, I'll give them the microphone. So the microphone is magic. I don't know if they think it's actually real, but it really does help the student. Like, it's my turn, it's your turn, it's my turn, it's your turn. But sometimes you just have to let them do it. So you could see when Elena and I were talking and I just like let her tell me about her New Year's. Sometimes they need that time. And if they're impatient in that regard, then sometimes I just let them talk. But if they're impatient during the activity, I'll just let them do it. And then if they do it and it's perfect, great. But if it's not, then I'll say something like really close. And then we'll go back and we'll do it together.
Yeah, it's funny because when we are adults and we're learning a foreign language, that is exactly the same thing. Like, that should come across your mind when you feel that urge to correct your student. Because if you've ever been in the shoes of a foreign language learner, you know the feeling when you're being corrected after every single word, when you're just trying to communicate a thought or something, just putting that language into practice. It's really challenging and it really discourages you if you constantly hear that correction.
And it's super humbling too. I remember when I was doing my ESL course, when I was doing my CELTA, one of the sessions was where we were supposed to learn Polish. And we had someone come in and just start speaking Polish to us. And like, none of us knew anything in Polish. So they're talking to us. And it's when you can really realize, like, this is what it sounds like when my students are in class. Like, they don't understand a single thing. And you're like, hello, but there's no association there. So
Exactly.
It's something that I really think everybody should experience once, is like taking a foreign language immersive course.
For sure. And then actually think that if that makes you feel that way being an adult, think about the kids. Mm-hmm. Think about what it must be for a child. Mm-hmm. Okay, Rosello asked, can the teacher be punished for skipped correction?
For skipped correction?
If skipped correction is justified, the teacher will not be punished. No, guys, you are the experts. So you choose the strategies that will benefit your students. And if you believe that it is appropriate to skip error correction because it is a free talk part of the lesson, or it is a warm-up part of the lesson where you just want to allow your student to express themselves, it's fine. Now, if you're talking about, I know that, sorry for interrupting you, Brittany, someone commented as well that if you keep skipping correction, the parents might take note of that and then think that you're actually not doing your job properly. But again, if something like that happens, then something reasonable should be put in the feedback.
Mm-hmm. Another with the feedback, now that you've mentioned that, is a lot of times with the CLIL lessons, the reading tasks are really difficult for your students. And I know that a lot of teachers have struggled with this too. When it comes to that, and there's a lot of words in there that I don't expect them to pronounce correctly, I let them read it, but I make sure I make a note in my feedback saying, today we practice reading for comprehension, not accuracy. So I want my parents to know that I recognize that they made those errors, but I chose not to correct them because I want my student to be able to look for keywords. Like, if they saw the word, when did dinosaurs go extinct? And they were able to find the word extinct in the text and they were able to give me the correct answer. If they mispronounced some words, that was not the purpose of the activity. So I always make sure that if there is an instance where I've skipped a lot of correction, I write in my feedback why. I write, today we practiced speaking, speaking for fluency. We practiced reading for comprehension. And then I also explain why that's important. Sometimes you'll find that there's so much reading that it's impossible to have your student read everything, especially if they're a slow reader. In those instances, I write in my feedback, today we practice scanning the text. We don't scan every text, but some texts we do scan. Why did we scan? Because that's a skill that they're going to need later in life. And because I know my student's a slow reader, we'd never get through all of the material if they read everything out loud. So if you do decide to skip correction, or you do decide to skip something, and you do want to cover yourself, I guess, for lack of a better term, write it in your feedback. Because then the parent sees that you know what you've done.
Right. Okay, I think we are about to wrap up here. We still have a couple more questions, but I don't want to push you guys for time. So we are going to address the remaining questions. Do not worry, our fantastic moderator, Lisa, who is behind the scenes right now. Hi, Lisa. She is the best. She's written them all down and we've got the questions. So we will address them either on the teacher portal for those of you who are part of Novakid team, but also we will cover them in our social media account, Novakid Career, if this is how you found out about this webinar. So don't worry. Also, please feel free to reach out to us on social media platforms. Thank you so much for participating. We hope that you take a few moments to fill out the feedback form that's just been sent to you by Lisa in the chat box. Answer a few questions. It's not going to take you long and it will really mean the world to us because we want to see what we can do to improve and get better at this. And we really want to make sure that you come back. We are looking forward to seeing you in our upcoming webinars that hopefully we'll see you there. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Let's give a round of applause to Brittany.
And Elena and Lisa and everybody else who made this possible. It's not just me, I'm a very small part of everything that's happened. So thank you.
You're a big part.
Everyone.
Thank you for always being so open and sharing your secrets and secret weapons in teaching. I think it's really enriching and I think it really builds our community stronger. Thank you so much and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you for coming.